Here we are going to learn about innate behavior, and then as a part of innate behavior, some major components like taxes, kinesis, and all those related terms. So innate behavior is the genetically modulated outward expression, action, or reaction of organisms in response to the stimuli from a given situation. To put in a different way, behavior is the genetically modulated response of an organism to the signals from its environment. It represents the cumulative expression of the activities of the organism in response to external and internal stimuli. Thus, behavior is a kind of relationship between organisms and their environment, or an adaptation of organisms that results from a long evolutionary process. All organisms exhibit different patterns of behavior depending upon their ability to respond to stimuli. These patterns range from relatively simple types to complex ones. Territory defense, courtship rituals, and mating behavior among animals and birds is an example of complex behavior of patterns of behavior. Animal behavior in general modifies the relationship between organisms and their environment. In some cases, behavior is directed at survival or reproduction, so it seeks to find out food and mates, avoid predation by others, react to members of the same or different species, and freely move around. An animal's behavior pattern is the sum total of its response. Like other phenotypic traits, behavior is a part of genetically determined and at the same time regulated and coordinated by nerves and hormonal mechanisms. But specific behavioral patterns are also shaped and molded in the face of environmental events. They also depend on past experiences and learning. Even though an animal's behavior may be a direct response to an external stimulus, its underlying mechanisms are nonetheless internal. Behavior can be triggered by something other than an immediate external stimulus. Directly or indirectly, behavior results from a combination between sensory centers and effectors. At the same time, it is influenced and determined by the functional attributes of receptors, conductors, and effectors. So, there is adaptive value of behavior. Behavior can be adaptive as well as homeostatic. It can serve as a part of the total adaptational package necessary for the success and survival of organisms. It helps organisms to obtain food and water, to establish territory, to obtain home range, to avoid enemies, to protect themselves from unfavorable or inhospitable conditions, to win mates or sexual reproduction or racial propagation, and so on. Species with non adaptive or maladaptive behavior would not normally survive long. Species survive so long as the behavior of their members have adaptive value. Behavior serves as the homeostatic mechanism in temperature regulation. Homeothermic animals have several behavior and physiological response to keep their body temperature within a narrow and constant range. For example, fluffing up of the feathers of birds and shivering of human body are behavioral adaptations when the atmosphere is too cold. Similarly, sweating in human beings and panting of dogs are behavioral adaptations to cool the body when the atmosphere is too hot. Many poikilotherms regulate their body temperatures only by behavioral adaptations. For example, lizards warm their body by basking and cool themselves by shrinking, seeking shade, etc. So, patterns of animal behavior. There are two major patterns of animal behavior, namely innate, instinctive, heritable or stereotyped behavior, and learnt or acquired behavior. Innate behavior is inborn, inherited, unlearned, reflexible, and automatic. Inflexible and automatic. On the other hand, learned behavior is gained from experience. It is flexible or changeable and it produces new experiences. The distinction between innate behavior and learned behavior is not always clear cut, and the majority of the behavioral responses in higher animals contain the components of both. Most animals have a high proportion of instinctive behavior and very little of learning. But many birds and animals exhibit great deal of learning behavior in addition to instinctive behavior. So firstly, we are going to learn about the innate behavior. Innate behavior is the automatic, inborn or instinctive, inherited or unlearned and genetically pre-programmed behavior governed by specific genes. It is mostly stimulus bound. In it, a particular pattern of stimuli triggers a sequence of responses. Innate behavior is genetically predetermined by the inheritance of specific pre-programmed built-in pathways. It is mostly stimulus bound. In it, a particular pattern of stimuli triggers a sequence of responses. Innate behavior is genetically predetermined by the inheritance of specific pre-programmed built-in pathways. As a result of this built-in pathways, innate behavior is rigidly fixed in the sense that a specific stimulus always evokes the same response. Although behavioral responses can be modified by training, the response to such training are not the same in all members of a species. Differences do occur, reflecting the past experience of the animal. The patterns of instinctive behavior evolve and get refined and perfected through natural selection over many generations. Their adaptive significance, their adaptive significance lies in the survival value they provide to species and also in their freedom from higher nerve centers. As a rule, instinctive behavior may not be modified by environmental factors. However, in many species, it undergoes modification due to interaction with the environment. Innate behavior can be very useful for the survival of the individuals of a species so long as it is involved in essential activities that rarely require modification. However, it has a major drawback in it that it cannot be modified when new stimulation or new situation demands a change. Innate behavior is predominant in those animals which have short lifespan, simple nerve system, and little contact with parents. Major components of innate behavior. Innate behavior is a complex predetermined responses. Essentially, it consists of three major components, namely orientation, simple reflexes, and instincts. So first one is the orientation. Orientation is a spatial adjustment or directional movement of animals induced by external or internal stimuli and initiated by endogenous activity. Essentially, it involves the positioning of the whole body or parts of it in relation to the external environment. So, it involves the ability of the animal to direct its position and movement in space and time according to certain conditions and events. Orientation usually occurs by the movement or rotation of the body around longitudinal transverse or dorsoventral axis. A rotation of the body in the longitudinal axis is called rolling, and in the transverse axis is called pitching, and in the dorsoventral axis is called yawing. This rolling involves body movements from before backward, pitching involves lateral movements from side to side, and yawing involves vertical movements from above downward. Locomotor orientation is of two kinds, taxis and kinase, which will be dealt in the next video.